Welcome to the Bend Like Bamboo Resilience Podcast, where we discover how life's greatest challenges can become our greatest strengths. I'm your host, Amanda Campbell, kinesiologist, MS specialist, resilience coach, and author. Get ready to be inspired by these remarkable humans who share their raw, real stories of transformation, the breakthrough moments, the lessons learned in the trenches, and the practical wisdom that turned their greatest challenges into their greatest strengths. These conversations offer hope, tools, and proof that resilience isn't just possible, it's your birthright. Together, let's discover how flexibility can become your superpower, turning life's storms into stepping stones towards the person you're meant to become. Let's dive straight into our next conversation. Hello and welcome back to the Bend Like Bamboo Resilience Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Campbell, and today I'm so thrilled to introduce you all to Lisa Johnson, a visionary creator whose journey perfectly embodies what it means to bend like bamboo and to transform challenges into breakthrough innovations. Lisa is the founder of the Elements Kit, a revolutionary self-discovery system that's changing how people understand their unique creative identity and unlock their hidden potential. But Lisa's path to creating this transformational tool wasn't straightforward. Like so many of us, she has faced periods of feeling lost, feeling stuck, and blocked about what's next in life. Rather than staying trapped in uncertainty, Lisa channeled her experience into creating something extraordinary. The Elements Kit combines the language of archetypes with 6 life elements to reveal each person's unique creative DNA, something so individual that the chance of anyone else having the same elements DNA is virtually 0.000000000, and I can keep going 481%, but we'll get into that. So it's very unique. And what makes Lisa's approach so powerful is that unlike traditional personality tests that categorize people, the Elements Kit guides individuals to discover their own one-of-a-kind creative identity. I've done this kit with her. It has helped me so much to understand myself, my superpowers, and how I can best serve in my personal life and in my professional life. And through coaching programs and team workshops, Lisa helps people move from feeling stuck to gaining clarity and confidence about their purpose, passion, and what to do next. So today, Lisa shares her journey of transformation, how she turned her own periods of uncertainty into a mission to help others discover their authentic selves, and why understanding your unique creative identity is the key to understanding a life you truly love. Lisa, I had to introduce you properly. I'm so honored that you came on my podcast today.
Oh, wow. What an introduction. And it is such a pleasure to be here. It really is. I'm so excited for this one.
Good, good. Now, let's start with how we met. How long's it been now that we've known each other?
I think more than 3 years. And
Yeah,
in some ways, that feels like a very elongated journey.
yes,
And in other ways, it just feels like yesterday.
I know.
And it's an interesting one because I remember the way that I learned about you was online. So it was through a Google search, actually. And
Yes,
obviously, I searched kinesiology,
yes.
get into the whole realm of sort of energy balancing and energy healing, which sits really nicely balanced with the Elements Kit. But I do remember something very interesting that I noticed about you and observed about you online was how integrated and how embodied you seem. So it's a lovely reflection now, thinking about what my mission is and how I support and assist people with a lot of help from you along the way and support. It's very much in search of what I feel I sensed and felt about you as a practitioner. We can
Okay.
get into more detail about what that means, but you struck me from the get-go as someone who's very embodied, where the various elements of yourself are really integrated sort of seamlessly into your day-to-day work, which I was very attracted to. And there's real magnetism in that, as you know. And I mean, I think that's the ultimate goal. So you are an incredible role model for me in that way.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. That's a beautiful thing to say. And it's been such a pleasure working with you and getting to know you over these years. You inspire me not only by what you've created, but who you are as a person and how you've held yourself through all the ebbs and ups and downs that you've gone through. And I appreciate you sharing that today with everybody.
Excellent. I cannot wait to get into it.
Beautiful. So, please explain the Elements Kit and how it differs from other personality assessments because we've heard of, Myers-Briggs or Strength Finder. I did Gallup, I remember that. But yours is very different.
Super different. And interestingly, my background in the design realm was very much as a design consultant, experiencing a lot of these psychometric tests. And I was seeing where the shortfalls were. And I was saying, if we look at something like Myers-Briggs, for example, it has a really fascinating history. A mother and daughter duo actually joined forces to develop that over many decades, actually. And it's still $1 billion industry, Myers-Briggs. And its whole premise is to try to categorize people into 16 different types. What I was learning and discovering through doing those tests over and over as a contractor in different organizations, what I was learning is that in that idea of really typecasting into those 16 types, and people will have heard of ENTP and INFJ and all the different categories into those that typecasting. Two
Mm.
things I observed, which I found uh, concerning in some ways, is probably the word, is that it seemed to me that the way that people were using the Myers-Briggs, they found it very challenging to remember the actual coding for themselves. And many people were experiencing getting a different result each time, which is not supposed to happen. And even Myers-Briggs,
Mm.
one of the original statements around Myers-Briggs is that people don't change. Once you're a type, you're a type. This was problematic to me because I could see that people were getting different results. They were finding it hard to remember. It was very challenging to relate. So, really, having done those tests, as well as Clifton Strengths, and there's some great things about those tests,
Mm.
I started to design a system as a human-centered designer where people could take their own self-discovery journey rather than it being a test online where you fill in some inputs about your past experience and it spits out a report for you and tells you how to interpret yourself
Yeah.
as one of those types. This is much more a self-determined process. It's very hands-on, it's very tactile, even though
Mm.
the Elements Kit exists as a physical kit as
Mm.
well as a digital online experience. And the idea is that you are, as you mentioned already, you are determining who you are uniquely in
Mm.
order to figure out what to do next. But you're also managing the components of self that change and grow and evolve over time. So, in
Yes.
other words, there are fundamentals, absolutely. There are fundamental elements which have been there since your childhood and will be predominant in your life till you
Mm.
take your last breath. But there are all these other moving parts. In other words, we're not an exact science, we change over time. And this is all about how you self discover and how you navigate and understand your life experiences, not just with a test result.
Yeah. I love the way that you just explained that. That was perfect. I've over the course of well, probably over the last 10 years, I've worked with many different healers, and there was one that helped me with my archetypes. And then I found Carolyn Meese, and then I really started to understand, yeah, how the readings of that can help you to understand where you're at on your life journey. And, it just has helped me so much on my healing journey as I've overcome aspects of the old version of me that maybe got caught up in prostitute, which is not about being a prostitute. It's
Mm.
about selling yourself short.
Yep.
And yeah, I learnt that from my mum. And when it was brought into my awareness, I was able to identify when I was doing that and therefore choose a new reaction and evolve and grow out of it. So that's another example of just how, yeah, these things, our archetypes can show up. They're reoccurring patterns of characters and settings and plot structures found in stories across cultures and time periods too.
Mm. A lot of archetypes are derived from roles. So they can be nurse, captain. They're actually they're single word metaphors to describe human behavior.
Mm.
And the important thing is we often use archetypes in our language every day to define behaviors in other people. So we'll say, oh, someone is an angel or someone is a saint to describe benevolent characters. There's
Yes.
a whole realm of shadow archetypes, like you mentioned, prostitute, and there's some of our favorites that people are very familiar with in contemporary language, like saboteur and victim. The
Yes.
Elements Kit actually defines you through the upside of yourself, the colorful spectrum of self across 6 different elements. So
Mm.
you're looking at self-expression, you're looking at connection and how you connect with others.
Mm.
You're looking at leadership and how you lead others. You're
Yeah.
looking at knowledge, how you learn or teach other people. You're looking at navigation, which is very much how you move, your style of movement through life. And then you're looking at belief as well. So when you start to classify archetypes into all those different groups, and I mean, archetypes are endless. They've been written about in a human sense since Plato's time, and how they're actually useful is to help us recognize patterns of behavior, as you say.
Mm.
Um, but also, over time, it's to really understand that we are not just one stereotype. We're not always just an angel, and
Yeah.
we're not always a warrior. And I think one of the fascinating things about the Elements Kit and the way that it looks across the spectrum of the upside of who you are across 6 elements, it's
Mm.
all about even understanding where conflicts within yourself might be, because you're never just one thing. Like
Mm.
on your own chart, which we can talk about in more detail soon,
Yeah.
there are definite dichotomies. And this is what's interesting about something like the Myers-Briggs. It likes to assume that you are kind of one-dimensional and very consistent in your behavior. But we
Mm.
know when we look at the galaxy of the way that the components of your elements discovery chart fits together, which is very pictorial, by the way. It's
Yeah.
a pictorial representation of your DNA and who you are.
Yeah.
See that there's all sorts of magic happening between multiple aspects, multiple archetypes. No one is just one archetype. On your actual discovery chart, you end up having 4 primary archetypes across the 6 elements. So you end up with a DNA of a profile of 24 archetypes. And
Yeah.
where the fun starts is understanding how they all interact and interrelate to one another. That's
Yeah.
where the dynamics and the ebb and flow of who you are as an organic human
Yeah.
really starts to get exciting.
And I can see how this is very useful for an individual, but I'm also seeing how, extraordinarily useful this will be for teams in the workplace.
Yeah, and I do a lot of work with teams. I mean, I worked with big organizations for many years, both client side as well as a design consultant. So, one of the things I was doing primarily as a service designer, designing products and services for big companies,
Yeah.
is figuring out how much that dynamic of human resource and humans within an organization was really influencing performance and outcomes,
Yeah.
and also fulfillment in the workplace. How
Mm.
happy humans are working with one another and achieving really great results. So, if we can dig deep into our individual DNA within any given team, it makes life so much easier, not just for the leader of that team, but also every individual in the team, because they get to express who they are as a full unique human.
Yes.
And you know what it's like when you apply for a job. It's very much about whether you're going to measure up to a job description or a JD.
Yeah.
This is different in the sense that yes, you have a JD, and yes, you have performance metrics about how you're going to measure up. But the Elements Kit really says, okay, you're so much more than your job description. What are you actually bringing in? And where are you going to find within your personal DNA, where are you going to find certain frictions or conflicts with yourself, with your leader, with others?
Yeah.
So, this is an awesome tool in terms of self awareness, integration, and bringing the best parts of yourself together just so you can optimize who you are, not just for your performance, but also, just as I say, for your fulfillment and how joyful you are, how much you feel that you're bringing your full self into any work environment.
Yeah, which leads to you being able to thrive and reach your fullest potential and to feel understood and to manage conflicts and feedback and all the juicy stuff that happens when you work within teams.
Yeah.
This is so cool. Well, why don't we use my cards as an example and dive in and give an example of the DNA?
Yes. Yes. Let's begin with this.
Okay.
So as I said, obviously people can't see a visual of this, but I can describe the elements kit has a whole lot of cards, and each card has features an archetype and its description. And the way that this works and you move through it is it's a process of self-selection. And the interesting thing about this is it's a guided process. So you're very much held accountable to the choices that you're made. And it's a gentle process. I guide through as a facilitator to ask questions, to reflect on your experiences. And you make choices about which archetypes you feel are representative of you across these 6 elements. So how do I express in the world? How do I connect with others? As I said, they're the 6 elements. It seems simple. Invariably, when people do this process, they work through the 6 elements in order to create their discovery chart. They end up with 24 choices. And invariably, there's a point in time across at least one of those element types, which are all color coded, where people say, and this is having done hundreds of charts now, far out, this is actually a bit more challenging than I thought, because the way that I've designed the kit is there are many archetypes which are almost the same. So, for example, there might be mentor, teacher, and coach, 3 archetypes which all share a lot of similar qualities. But when you're refining and having to make some final choices, you're needing to think very subtly about the nuances and the differences between those choices.
Mm.
And that says a lot about your experience. And even the process of your dialogue and the conversation as we facilitate this process can be hugely, hugely enlightening. So that said, you move through this process and you made your choices, and what you've ended up with on your chart in number 1 position, I can go through that so people get a bit of a clear picture of this. In your first highest priority position,
Yeah.
across all your elements, you've got in expression, you've got storyteller, which was very evident to me when I first saw your website. In connection, you've got intuitive. So you're driven with human connection, you're driven by your intuitive powers. In leadership, you have challenger, which is super interesting. I'll talk more about that in a minute.
So will I.
In knowledge, you have channel, which relates very closely to intuitive. Channel is your ability to actually be able to draw down from the imagination ideas, which you then materialize. Your number 1 in navigation is seeker. So there's a thirst for knowledge and a quest for new experiences. And then your number 1 in belief is mystic. So your interest in the divine mystical world.
Yes.
Something to say about that last element, which is belief, is that's something that never turns up in a test that is very quantitative and structured and quite rigid, like the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
That whole idea of belief is, what do I believe in? What is my cultural heritage? What do I base my values on? So that one's really important. And of course, across those 6 elements, we have a full picture of who you are. Now, they're just your top 6. So you
Yes.
can see how you can dig deeper and deeper and deeper into all of those different elements for all of the other choices you made. Some of
Absolutely.
the other things that show up for you are counselor, healer, mother, the mother connection. So interesting. And I've experienced that firsthand working with you, that just the nourishment of those incredible archetypes. In your leadership, you have others of warrior and guide. You're a great mentor, teacher, and facilitator. And you're also a driver and sprinter. There's a lot of high energy with you in terms of how you drive ideas forward. And that connects nicely with your entrepreneur and your strategist. And then, of course, in belief, you have spiritualist, medium, other ways in which you're actually channeling and which you're showing up optimistically in terms of your faith in the world and your own integral spirit, right? So there's a lot there, and
Yeah.
it's tricky without being able to see it. But the point is, it becomes very clear when this is all laid down almost on a checkerboard of hexagon cards.
Yeah.
I can begin to see some very interesting patterns about the dynamic, as I said, between these things. So, for example, you've got a lot of very high energy, more yang, if we want to talk about energy, the yang energy, the masculine energy. You've got a lot of ones that are driving, challenging, really getting shit done. The entrepreneurial drive for not just purpose, but profit as well. There's a lot of yang energy there, but then there's this incredible spread of yin, more feminine energy through your chart, which again is the healer, the mother, the counselor, and the intuitive.
Mm.
So when we look at this, this would explain why sometimes you're on fire with this real drive, and
Mm.
other times you're leaning into this very gentle, intuitive process.
Mm.
Sometimes you're strategist, which is more of a left brain thinker. It's
Mm.
all about logic, frameworks, what to do next, roadmaps, planning may conflict with your intuitive that just wants to move very, very gently and easily in alignment with your channel, just to draw imaginative ideas down and just follow your nose.
Yeah, absolutely. That's me to a T.
Yeah. And so it's the balance of energy, given that you're in the realm of energy healing, the
Mm.
balance of energy there becomes so apparent on your chart, and you can begin to work tactically with it. In
Mm.
other words, you can begin to say, right, I have an upcoming meeting and I'm going to be meeting with these individuals. And I need to be very aware, mindful of taking certain archetypes from my chart in to lead this conversation.
Yes.
Others perhaps need to take a back seat. Like maybe today I'm in a big business meeting. Maybe today Mystic can take a back seat
Yeah.
or Medium can take a back seat. But maybe you need a bit of your magician power
Yeah.
coupled with your strategist, coupled with your challenger to really take in whatever it is that needs to be negotiated.
Yeah.
So it's all about that mindfulness of which components of self
Yeah.
are going to serve me best for the outcome that my seeker and my driver want to drive toward.
Amazing. Amazing. I just love this stuff so much. Oh my gosh. And you get to do it all day. This is
Yes.
so good. So this is a great example of how you would coach someone one-on-one, give them an understanding of their archetypes and how, yeah, they can integrate that into their daily life to live their best life and to transform through difficult times. Anytime I've had a card reading, it has been at a crossroads, and
Mm.
that's really, really helped as to, which archetypes are challenging for me at the moment and which ones are going to really help me and how to balance them out.
Yeah. And we mentioned before shadow archetypes.
Yeah.
When you uh, complete a discovery chart, it's in that colorful spectrum of the upside. So there's no such thing as a bad archetype in the
Yeah.
elements kit. However, there's a whole set of challenges which sit to the side of the kit, and they are the opposing challenging forces. What happens when you start to just, feel encroached by the energy of saboteur, where you're self-sabotaging or you're feeling that someone else is sabotaging you,
Mm.
or you're really moving into victim behavior where you're feeling the continual helpless victim in a situation. There's a whole cast of characters which we bring in to work with as we start to map with the other tools in the kit your life experiences, both
Yeah.
past and planning your future experiences that you'd like to manifest.
Mm.
Shadow becomes super important because there's a flip side and a shadow behavior with every, like a good example is challenger. Challenges are wonderful in terms of challenging the status quo, challenging, in your case, a diagnosis you were given where doctors said you may never walk again from this point in time onwards.
Mm.
Without your challenger, you may not have had the grit to actually oppose that. So
Mm.
there's wonderful healing and liberation that a challenger can represent. When the
Mm.
challenger buddies up with some shadow forces, a challenger could be over argumentative
Yeah.
or not listening to different sides of the story, or um, you know, disruptive or antagonistic in a way that is counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how these archetypes work. We want to try to get every archetype within your chart in its best alignment.
Yes.
Then we want to get all of those archetypes in their best alignment, working together for a sweet spot of integration.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we want to be super aware about how we're using each of those archetypes in
Yeah.
different allegiances and whatnot
Yeah.
to overcome those shadow forces, which is a daily, if not a minute by minute practice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I know archetypes is once you know which ones you're working with and are your DNA, and sometimes they change a little bit too, over time. But yeah, it was about the progression of the evolution through them. So when it was more sort of the initial stages of initiation, and I was heavily in prostitute, for example, in the past where I was selling myself short. And then eventually that archetype started to disappear in that shadow aspect as I was getting more readings. And even with Challenger, I, as a child, needed to challenge to get myself out of situations that weren't safe. And so that's how it served me. But then, yes, when I am in more of a shadow or I'm not high vibration, it can be, yeah, it can become conflicting and not productive at all in conversations, in a dynamic around teams, of course. So, but it has served me very well in situations like, challenging the status quo, stretching myself more than usual, and, my diagnosis as well. So this is so cool, so juicy.
Yeah. And it really is about that. It's about optimizing the best of who you were born to be.
Mm,
And part of that quest is every time you're meeting a test or a challenge, how do I return to my best self? How do I return to the most creative and productive aspect of myself from an archetypal perspective?
yeah, returning to your best self. Because it's very similar to how I coach my clients is at the end of the session, I want them to understand what they're letting go of and then what they're moving towards, I guess, in a sense of returning to their best self. And with that information, that's powerful. That's
Yep.
very empowering information.
And speaking of empowerment, something that's interesting, the way a lot of these psychometric tests work, where you input data about gleaning information from your past experience. What's interesting about that is, let's say you have a situation when you're very young, and let's say you are, as a child, very confident about getting up on stage and performing. And then let's say you have a traumatic incident where you're bullied about how you performed by an adult or a peer, another child, for example. And that sends you into a state of, really lacking confidence and quitting something which you had really great potential at.
Mm,
What's interesting about a psychometric test that will just ask you a lot of questions about what your past behavior
mm,
is that there can be dormant potential within you that for one reason or other, through any form of trauma, you've repressed or you've pivoted away from at some point in your life. So you don't have much evidence of that existing in your life. So, in other words, if someone's to glean your past experience to figure out who you are now, they
mm.
may not see the unseen treasure and the untapped potential. And that's precisely why the Elements Kit is very much a conversational tool and a tool of self discovery where you can reflect even on the hidden and unseen parts of yourself that a psychometric test is just, it's not going to find. It's not going to know these things about you. Just as I said before, it's not going to understand your cultural values or your belief system. It's not going to understand your desire. So the Elements Kit also talks very deeply about what resonates with you in terms of something that you would love to explore. And it's not just about, well, I want to sing in order to become famous because, certain people are going to be driving toward that in their life. It's not necessarily about finding archetypal alignment in order to make a full-blown career or vocation out of something. It's really just about giving yourself an opportunity to express that in a personal way because you've never had the opportunity before. You've lacked the confidence. Someone has told you, and how many people do we hear about? I hear about people every week who've been told by their parents, you need to go in a certain direction in life, doctor or lawyer. It's very common, as you would have
Mm,
experienced yourself.
mm.
Your choices may become limited through survival strategies or through, shaming or whatever's happened. So this is very much about who are you in your own eyes, on your own terms, and what are the things that are not yet expressed within you that you want to bring to the fore, even in a small capacity, even in a small creative exploration, even as a small side project or a hobby or something.
Yeah.
So the Elements Kit's not just about, from a personal development perspective,
Yes.
it's not just about career. It's not a career finder. It's a who am I as a holistic being, and how do I not only bring the best of my being to life, but also allow that untapped potential to be really celebrated and championed.
Yes, which is why this is fantastic for kids, year
Mhm.
11, 12, year
Yeah.
9. This is fantastic for anyone going through a crossroads as well of just, yeah, navigating forward from that. and reconciliating and closing off old chapters, moving forward with confidence into the new ones. And leading teams, like I can really understand now, and I think everybody would get a really good insight now into what they would be able to get out of a coaching experience with you, understanding this one-on-one. Talk me through what you do and how it works when you're working with teams at work.
Yeah, great question. So there are two ways that I work with leaders and teams. The first is more intimate in terms of one-on-one coaching. So that might be an executive, for example, or just managers within any team structure within a corporation or organization. But usually the way we start is with workshops. And that is where we come in, run a day workshop, and that's where the team will assemble and each do their elements discovery chart as the first port of call. And we will share that as a group so that it's and that's an amazing dynamic. Like to hear people self-express the full picture of themselves, both inside and outside of work, within the limits of what they feel comfortable sharing, of course. There's never
Yeah.
pressure.
Yes.
Um, they really get to be seen and heard. And some amazing magic happens with this by the time you actually spend a day in the company of your team. And remember, I'm often dealing with teams who have team members spread out all across Australia. So a workshop like this, often people will fly in from interstate and they'll be meeting each other face to face for the first time. The dynamic and the power of that is just extraordinary. And then by the time they open up this incredible, colorful elements gift box, really, of who they are and how they can actually share that with others in their team. By the time you get to the end of a workshop, the end of a day's workshop, not only do people know each other fully and wholly,
Yeah.
but they also have worked out how to use other tools in the Elements Kit to assemble each individual around whatever the team goals are.
Right.
So, and that can be based to KPIs and OKRs and all those other metric systems within an organization about what the team is striving for by end of financial year or next financial year, any given quarter, this month, a week. So it's very goal oriented. It's not just about who are you and that's fun and now we all go home. It's okay, who are you in your own on your own terms? How are you perceived by others in this team? And
Yeah.
how can we work together with the best of who we are relative to these very real goals, which we have metrics around within an organization?
Oh,
So that becomes powerful over time. And with the coaching, the ongoing coaching that I do, naturally, that's something that we align very carefully to what the business really wants to be achieving with this individual for their own benefit and their own fulfillment, as I say, as well as the benefit of the role that they're really trying to
mm.
perform well in.
What a wonderful thing for a business to offer their team, their people,
Yeah.
to have
And
that understanding of themselves, but also how to best accelerate in their roles. And it becomes more filled with purpose and joy. Like their role will become so much more fulfilling, I imagine.
well, what I've seen happen is, and this was about 2 months ago in a workshop, a GM was sitting beside, because sometimes we work in pairs, which is hugely powerful as well, was sitting beside a team member, one of her team members, and they got to know each other so well in this teamwork that it actually precipitated, after a restructure, a complete rethinking of the role that this team member was able to apply for and be positioned in.
Mm.
And you think, well, that's what happens all the time with restructures and people shift here and there. But that one simple exercise of that team member being seen by that GM who had both the authority and sort of the decision-making capacity and status to be able to make effective change, that one small change in a role to maximize someone's potential can not just influence how fulfilled they feel, but it can change the entire course of their vocation and their career from that point on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff.
Absolutely. So, what inspired you to create the Elements Kit in the first place?
Well, way back in when I was studying many decades ago now, actually, archetypes. It was a personal journey, and I found it so powerful studying through some of the contemporaries, like Carolyn Mace, for example. And I was finding that work so personally powerful. And then at the same time, I was developing all this design skill around human-centered design. And as an alchemist, which is one of my primary archetypes within the belief element,
Mm.
I could see an incredible potential for the alchemy between archetypal thinking and these design tools. And so everything in the Elements Kit is unique and original and designed from the ground up because I am a designer and innovator at heart as well.
Yes.
And the idea of what I was writing about even a couple of decades about on my own personal journey was this idea of creative alignment. I was really intrigued that even people that I knew who were in their sort of late 20s at the time were somehow able to find this magic sweet spot, which set them up for a really an easeful progression where they were very aligned with what they were doing and they enjoyed very early success. And I'm talking phenomenal success where they were doing world-class stuff at a young
Yeah.
age.
Yeah.
I was intrigued by that because I'm like, wow, what is it that they're doing? And later I learned studying Dr. Carl Jung's work. He was one of
Mm.
the masters of archetypal thinking and shadow work as well. What I learned that I was referring to as creative alignment, he referred to as integration. And again, it's that idea through one single vocation or many different pursuits. How do I balance the energies of myself archetypally to find that sweet spot? And that seemed to be the magic that these people who are aligned, successful, and very happy doing the work that they were doing in the world
Mm.
with purpose and passion, whatnot. They seemed to be able to do this very naturally. And I, I was not so naturally able to do that. And it took me, as I say, many years to uncover a system that would help people who weren't naturally able to find that easefulness and that alignment. How something like this, how design could be used for a discovery process that could help you unlock the same.
Mm.
So it really came from that quest and a personal interest in all of the subjects that the Elements Kit combines.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you've been exposed, to some, pretty incredible human beings in the wonderful work that your career. So before this, let's talk about what you were doing before the Elements Kit.
Yeah, well, I mean my trajectory, how I talked before about how there are some things that stay very consistent and they even with the ebb and flow of life and other archetypes coming to the fore and then receding and coming to the fore and then receding. Design is one of my big ones. So designer as an archetype has always been with me. I grew up with a designer as a father and he was a great example he was preternaturally gifted. He was an automotive designer,
Yeah.
but he found creative alignment very early in life. And then he followed one trajectory. He was dedicated to that cause for his entire life as an automotive designer. And of course, he moved up the ranks and became chief of design and whatnot over time. But I think it was his inspiration as well that, how does one actually design a life they love? And from when he was an apprentice at 16 or 17, that was something that he almost fell into very naturally. But like I say, the rest of us, it's often a bit of a wayward path. So I think design has always been there for me. A strong precedent has been set. And then I have, as a seeker like you, I have actually traversed all domains of design. So I've gone through even beginning in landscape architecture, interior design and architecture, graphic design, moving into experience design, which is more the whole world of digital primarily that I worked in, designing digital products and services.
Mm.
Through all of that, even into working with my husband, who's an ex-architect, to design a house, primarily that one continuum for me has been around design.
Yeah.
So it's very natural that the next evolution, apart from just designing products and services for big companies, which I've done for many years, all the big, telcos and banks and health insurance companies, I've worked for many of them across lots of sectors.
Yeah.
It seemed natural that the very next elevated sort of embodiment of these ideas is now how can you take all this thinking and how can you, as the most intimate product and service yourself, how can you design your life, design, the most valuable and precious thing, really,
Yeah.
your own humanness.
So when you said before how you've what you noticed of what how people excelled was the integration of the understanding of what the elements kit and the archetypes gives you as with and also being able to execute your talents, and this seems to lead to brilliance in your observations. In the same way, how have you noticed, because I've met some incredibly smart entrepreneurs in my time as well, and exceptionally smart, brilliant, executors, but have noticed shadow aspects that have led to their downfall.
Mhm.
Yeah, what can you speak of in that sense, in the opposite way of what you've observed?
Well, if you think about archetypes again, returning to the light and shadow side, and again, Carl Jung spoke about this. His whole life's work was on this,
Mm,
that continual tension of the double-sided coin that you just can't have light without shadow, and
mm,
you can't have shadow without light. And as an optimist, you'll appreciate that, we can choose to lean into the idea that light is ever powerful. I do remember a healer once saying to me, notice how when you light a tiny candle in a dark room, the entire room is lit. If you take the same volume of darkness, it doesn't stand a chance against a room full of light, which I
oh,
think is a really interesting premise for the elements kit. Because again, we're continually trying to return to the light upside state, the creative state of every human being. So shadow is always there. Shadow is always lurking. Shadow is lurking minute to minute in our daily kind of mental hurdles and challenges.
yeah,
And as we said right at the beginning, that conflict and tension in even in a work environment, it's usually quite simple in the sense that the archetypal need of one person is not being met by the archetypal need of another. So
yeah,
if you can start talking archetypes, you can work out in that conflicted situation where the shadow has come into it. A great example is two archetypes, competitor and hustler. They're both fabulously dynamic. They're quite yang, again, quite masculine, yang driven archetypes.
yeah,
They're amazing. They're people who just know how many CEOs possess either one or both of those, and that can be a real superpower.
yeah,
But when competitor falls into shadow side, it's all about winning at all costs,
yeah,
often at the expense of other humans. But that can easily, with acknowledgement, especially when two people are locking horns. And I've had a story about this where two CEOs in the finance industry within an advisory board, we used this archetypal understanding to unlock horns. And as soon as they could see, okay, let's talk about this from archetypal need perspective, and
yes.
let's work out how we're moving into that shadowy domain of winning at all costs, as opposed to a more judicious and fair analysis of the situation to make it a win-win for whatever the archetypal need is in each individual, right? So all of this stuff can be decoded archetypally and actually just abated so quickly, because the reality is shadow's always there, and it's the choice we're continually making for the benefit of humanity, not just ourselves and winning. So it's a fascinating one.
This
And
would solve so many problems at work.
it does continually and quickly, faster than you think, because it's almost as though, and this is why bringing design into it and circling back to that, the whole elements kit is so visual, because something happens to our brains when we can see something mapped out diagrammatically like a chessboard of, in this case, hexagon parts. We can fit and shuffle and shapeshift. And when we can see things, we can understand them better. We can get a much clearer understanding. So the fact that the kit is visual and designed
Yeah, it's
is
beautiful.
really, really important. And the fact that the physical kit is tactile, because you can have people moving through a conflict where they're actually moving things around on a table and saying, well, this is where I feel this archetype within myself sits. And this is where I think we're not seeing eye to eye, or where my challenger is moving from the light side to shadow side, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. in on your website, you need to have like a section for couples, a section for kids, a
Yeah.
section just one-on-one individuals, and for work. It's such a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant product that is going to help so many people, Lisa.
Yes, it's deep, deep work. And like I say,
Yeah.
it took many years to design this so it feels simple and it feels fun. But then as I say, the subtle nuances of it as you get into it and you're self-directing and guiding and thinking about your really reflecting honestly on your behaviors and also your future aspirations. The work is really deep. It's fun, but it's deep. And there's usually an insight, even a small insight, that can really change the course of your future.
Is there an example you can think of someone you've worked with recently and a big transformation you can anonymously speak of?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones was working with a young man who was 21 who was autistic, and he had just done a very brave thing in quitting a job working in a factory on a production line with a very, very reprimanding militant boss. And on a day-to-day basis, everyone on that production line was in tears. It was a really, really miserable work environment.
Hmm.
And this young man, just emerging, into career direction. Um, he'd always been diagnosed, prescribed from a very young age about who he was. And his mum came to me and said, I would really love to give him an opportunity to do his own discovery chart and work through it. We spent many hours going through his discovery chart, brilliant, brilliant mind, and actually was able to perceive things about the design of the elements kit that other people didn't have the understanding or the knowledge about. He was a real pattern maker, real systems thinker, and he was able to identify straight away, which I found fascinating. But to cut a long story short, he went from having no job, very low self-esteem, having come off the back of this really quite grueling situation in an unhappy work environment, to then doing his discovery chart and understanding the components of himself through his eyes. His mother said after that session, which she sat in, but just very, very quietly, so it was all about him doing the work. She said, I feel like I've seen my son for the first time in his life, because it's always been about everybody else telling me about the limitation and everybody else telling me about, the special need, or, the various challenges. This was him self-governing his own journey. And from that point, when he could see himself and express himself fully through his discovery chart, and his mum could see, she could help set up some support situations in terms of a business mentor, because he's very entrepreneurial. Maker was showing up. He loves to use his hands. He was very innovative, brilliant mind, as I say, as a child, just inventing experiments and physical, zip lines like flying foxes across multiple backyards, and very, very rudimentary at a very young age. But he just had this mind to be able to create and innovate. What was fascinating is that he was then able to get some mentorship, and then before long landed an amazing opportunity working with a brilliant entrepreneur who was the founder and franchise developer of barbershops, very cool hipster kind of barbershops. And for this young man, this was a dream for him to be employed in this situation, because he was using his hands, he was an apprentice as well. So he had an opportunity to be a maker, an apprentice, an innovator, learn from one of the best in the business about how to become an entrepreneur over time,
Yeah.
and found this fulfilling job, which he's still in 2 years later. I think we're almost getting to really spreading his wings, because of what his discovery chart allowed him to express and see about himself. And it was really a moment of just taking back his power and stepping into an entire new life.
What a gift. What a gift to give someone.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Really. That's an amazing transformation. Oh, one final question, Lisa. Can you think of how, when you've understood yours, how that got you through some tough moments?
Oh, yeah, such a good one. And I think, I mean, I know we talk about resilience a lot in the sessions I've had with you over many years coaching. Um, I think something interesting about resilience, we talk a lot about bending like bamboo, flexing, and that idea of just yielding, being supple but really strong at the same time. I also think a big component of resilience is creativity, how to create your way forward. And when you know who you are, you know what to be creating and how to create it in alignment with yourself and what you truly desire. So
Mm.
I think in my own case, just a deeper self-awareness of all of the archetypes within myself, the ebb and flow of them, which ones actually need to be expressed at certain times, which ones need to recede, which ones need more self-care. All of this is wonderful to sort of rejuvenate from a resilience perspective in developing resilience. But it's also brilliant because you can just put into action your best creative forces to be your allies, to move through any dark times, any dark night of the soul, any challenges. Knowing yourself creatively, I think, is a real key to how you, as I say, design your life and move through any
Yeah.
obstacle. So I think it's just, and it's a continual check-in with myself. I'm continually referring back to my chart. I'm walking the talk and actually doing the work. It's a never-ending process of self-discovery with every challenge that comes your way. But I think it's, getting back to archetypes and the definition of an archetype, the reason it's so potent to understand is that any archetype that you possess and express through, it's a pattern of power. So, in other words, when you're bringing down imagination and then you're translating that into physical realities and outcomes and things that you want to make or build or businesses that you want to run, essentially, it's the way that you empower yourself, generate power in order to create, and then empower others. So if we think of it like that, that it's a continual revisiting of what our patterns of creative power are in order to become more resilient, in order to overcome, in order to fully self-express, and in order to, really have a life that you love, which is the ultimate goal, right?
Yes, such a perfect explanation. And the more that I reflect on, yeah, the archetypes you've pulled for me, that we've pulled together, have helped me on my journey to just return back to who I authentically am, and that is enough, and to integrate that into my business expression has been quite big and
Yes.
important work, which always works best because yeah, with when I'm in shadow, I'm always trying to be and do so much, and it's exhausting.
Mm.
It's realizing where my talents really lie and focusing more on the healer. That became a quote for me. Remember, you're a healer. Let that guide you.
Yes.
Okay? And rather than yeah, thinking it was other things. And when I focused on that, a lot of things started to realign in the way that I was working, and my
Yep.
programs and all that has unfolded with that topic. And I keep that statement on the top of my diary every morning.
Yep. And I think it's very much about navigating with feeling. Like ultimately, the elements kit, it's a thinking process to begin with. But then you find very quickly you're navigating by resonance. You're being driven by your own intuitive assessment of self and
Mm.
sharing of those ideas. And I think when we move into full embodiment, we're actually driving with feeling, even if thought is helping guide us and is the framework to get things done. If we can move with feeling and we can move with real reverence for self and alignment with self in a way that feels harmonious, as you say,
Mm.
that's how to have the life you love.
Oh, what a perfect way to end this podcast, Lisa. It's such a beautiful, deep, transformative conversation with you today. I loved it. Honestly, everyone, if you want to check out the Elements Kit, theelementskit.com.au, and you can also find Lisa on LinkedIn. All of your notes and links will be in the show notes. Lisa, thank you so much.
Oh, it is a pleasure, absolute pleasure to be on the journey, walking beside and doing the good work and finding purpose and passion in every moment. Love
Yeah,
it.
thank you for everything that you do. Please keep doing what you do. It's magic.
Yeah, likewise, right back at you.
Thank
Thank,
you, honey.
thank you.
Thank you. Remember,
Thanks.
true strength lies in flexibility, and keep bending like bamboo. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for joining us on the Bend Like Bamboo Resilience podcast. I hope today's conversation inspired you. And if this resonated with you, please rate, follow, and share it with someone who needs to hear this episode. If you would like to go deeper with me, whether you're leading through burnout, navigating health challenges, or rebuilding after setbacks, I'd be honored to support you. Head to benlikebamboo.com to explore our programs, check out my new book, or book a free discovery chat. Trust your ability to bend and flow with life. I'll catch you at the next episode.